นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังอนุตตรังอุปัชฌายังนัมมัสสามิ When I first came to Thailand, I was desperate to be one of Ajahn Chah's attendants. And I realized that not speaking Thai, that would be very difficult. So I was very diligent in learning the language, although it was very difficult given that we didn't have any books, teachers, and most of the people around me spoke the local dialect and couldn't really distinguish between Central Thai and Northeast Thai dialect. Anyway, I progressed and started to have some opportunities to massage his feet or his hands and to fulfill some of the duties. And one I liked to do a lot was to clean his false teeth. Ajahn Chah's had no teeth at all, no natural teeth. They'd all been extracted. Now you remember, maybe those of you who've read Stillness Flowing will remember that he would tie a rock to his tooth and then just throw the rock. And then he had all the teeth that remained taken out in one go, which is quite not such a good thing to do, I think. Anyway, he had 2 sets of false teeth when I was there. And they subtly changed the shape of his mouth in different ways. I could tell which set of false teeth he was wearing by looking at his face. So he would be sitting talking to somebody and then he would just take out his teeth like this. And he'd run over. You want to be the first person to get there. And his teeth were very stained because he still chewed betel nut in those days. And to clean his teeth, use sand, like a tooth wood and sand. Well, you can imagine how happy it would be to sit cleaning someone's false teeth with sand. So when he became seriously ill, bedridden, and had stroke, and his teeth were removed. After that year, when he became bedridden and stopped speaking, never put the teeth in again. And for me, it helped me in some way, in that without his teeth, he was never really Ajahn to me in the same way. I'm sure you know people who have complete sets of false teeth, and when they take out their teeth, how their face collapses. And it's not the same face anymore. And so the difficulties, the emotional difficulties of seeing a teacher bedridden for years were for me somewhat modified, because I could never really see that figure on the bed as the Luang Por Chah that I love so much, simply because I didn't have these false teeth in. So returning to the theme of last night's Dhamma talk and dealing with hindrances, that first hindrance of sensual desire, that looking for refuge in sensual pleasure, seeking to escape from the present moment into that fuzzy, familiar feeling. And familiarity is also, I think, a part of that. We crave the familiar. And in the course of meditation, the mind wanders off. You realize, you wake up to the fact that what you're thinking about right now is not what you intended to be thinking about. It's a moment of sampajanya, clear comprehension. Return to the breath. This is a movement of right effort. Re-establish the recollection of the breath. It's mindfulness. So these three virtues working together. But with this first hindrance, it's common for the mind to return again and again. There are certain periods in our life where there is this strong pull towards the sensual world. Other times when there's a strong pull towards the sort of negative, cynical view of ourselves and the world. And simply bringing the mind back to the object is not working. So this is when we use an antidote, a remedy. The remedy for sensual desire, the pleasure and the indulgence in sensual thoughts, sensual perceptions, is to open up the mind to the way things are in a specific way. And that involves looking at the nature of the physical body. So when the mind is caught in sensuality, it takes a particular partial view, a distorted view of sensuality, the sensual world, And that distorted or partial view has a specific name and is called a nimitta. So nimitta is an interesting technical term in Pali, and it's also used in samadhi, for it's like the sign that the mind is entering into samadhi. So nimitta will often be a visual nimitta, because of all the senses, the visual sense is the strongest. And then the hearing is the second most prominent sense. And so sometimes samadhi nimittas are sounds, but primarily forms. Bright light is most common. Sometimes it can be a feeling, like a tactile feeling. Anyway, that's something of a digression. That's the use of the word nimitta that you may have come across in your studies. But nimitta is also used for any representation, a partial representation of a complex reality. So when the mind is caught up in sensual world and enjoying the sensual world, its relationship is not to the sensual world as such, but to a nimitta, to a distorted representation of it. So when we think of sensual pleasure, for example, we tend to focus on the peak pleasure associated with that. So let's say you have a desire arises in your mind. How does that feel, the arising of desire? Is that pleasant or unpleasant? It's unpleasant, I think, isn't it? Is the arising of a desire is the arising of a sense that you're lacking something. So if you want something, then obviously it means that you're lacking it. So the arising of desire is the sense of lack, and you want to remedy that lack. And so you pursue the object. And that pursuit might be short or long, but that gap between the forming of a desire and the satisfaction of a desire is not pleasant. You know, there's some tension there. Some when I want this, I need this, and also perhaps there is fear that you may not get this thing that you want, or maybe that someone else will take it away from you or take it before you. And the extent to which that desire obsesses you can affect your behavior, your conduct towards other people, can lead you to make compromises on your ethical standards and to break precepts. It becomes like all-encompassing. So that's when craving becomes upadana, it becomes attachment. Attachment means when you give value and meaning and precedence to some object of desire. So then maybe you're fortunate and you experience that pleasure. But the interesting observation to make about that peak moment of pleasure is to what extent the pleasure is derived from the object, and to what extent it is merely the cessation of all the suffering that arises in the mind in the pursuit of that object. So there's the pleasure, and the pleasure is not sustainable, simply because the pleasure is dependent on your body and mind, and the body and mind is changing all the time. You get hungry, you get thirsty, you get tired, and the mind is unable to sustain any peak emotion for very long. It's just not possible. Biologically, it's not possible. So then there's desire for more, or to replenish and to relive. So how can I hold on to this? How can I prevent this from disappearing? How can I get more of this? These are new forms of suffering that are arising. Then if the sense object is something that you have some hold upon, then the tendency is to become used to it. But then there's that grief where you're not getting the same pleasure from that object and that thing that you did before. And also there's a fear of losing it, and tension, and how to take care of it. And eventually you are separated from that pleasure. So now if we look at this whole kind of process from the initial, like that being, it's like in the case of love and lust, like Cupid with his arrow, but it's like being like an arrow of desire, it's just and then the whole follows some particular desire and pleasure that you've pursued and gained and lost, and just see that whole process. And now that kind of peak pleasure is seen within the context, and it's no longer so compelling. And this is why the Buddha says, look closely in the sensual world, the suffering exceeds the pleasure. So that's like counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense, I think, for most people, unless you're willing to really analyze the pursuit of pleasure, the experience of pleasure, the growing familiarity with the pleasure, and the waning of pleasure and separation from pleasure. So here this is, I would say, like really a characteristic of Buddha Dhamma with regard to sensual pleasure. Most religions have some kind of harsh things to say about it. And you're bad, you're evil, if you're caught up in a sensual world, and you should not be like that. But the Buddha is saying that defilement is always the outcome of a distorted view of reality. Conversely, virtue is always, like an authentic virtue, is always the outcome of a correct view of reality. So if you have this strong sensual desires and sensual pull and caught up in that whole sphere of life, it's not like you're a bad person and you've got to stop being like that and just pull yourself together. It's, look, stand back a little bit. What's going on here? Where is the wrong thinking? Where are the mistaken assumptions? Where are you looking at this whole topic in the wrong way? In the case of this first hindrance, how this manifests in meditation, then the shortcut, they say, way of illuminating this wrong thinking is to cultivate the perception of its opposite. So with the physical attraction and the obsession, absorption in sensual world, and looking at the unattractive elements of the body, the asubha kamatan, is a sobering practice. So it's not like an absolute reality. Actually, the physical body is disgusting. But what we're saying is that there are aspects of the physical body which are attractive. There are aspects of the body which, when you see them, you feel quite neutral towards them. And there are aspects of the physical body which are disgusting. And when the mind is caught in sensuality, it censors out the disgusting or even the neutral elements and focuses exclusively on the attractive elements. And because out of this complex reality of the body, which including inherently pleasant aspects, neutral aspects, and unattractive aspects, and making a nimitta out of the pleasant, then we consciously go against the grain and we look at the unpleasant. So one of these, and now we come back to the anecdote from the beginning, one of the powerful visualizations or reflections can tease. If we're thinking about a handsome or a beautiful human being, just imagine the most beautiful woman, the most handsome man without any teeth. Now, the like big handsome man or beautiful woman, and then they turn around and you see this got this colour. But why? Just think about it. Like 99% of the body is just exactly the same it was when you thought it looked so attractive. All this is just the teeth, just taken out, just that. And that's the difference. So how fragile that perception of beauty is, how easily it can be disrupted or how it can disappear. So there are many different reflections on the physical body, and you can choose one, go through the 32 parts of the body, and usually you'll find one that really appeals or is powerful for you. And then you cultivate that as a nimitta also. So this means like an image of it, and a subha nimitta. So sensual desire is based upon the wrong grasping of a supernimitta. So supernimitta, super means beautiful. So it's this created sign of beauty, which we take from different aspects of physical body or things that we really like, and we make something, and that's what we get distracted by. So we make a super nimitta. It might be teeth, could be skin, and could be hair. It's like hair of the head. You just to see hair as hair, you know. If you go into a barber shop in the old days and see all the hair on the floor, you know, and the barber will come with a broom and sort of sweep it out. And you think, yeah, it's just like hair. So we're not saying, you know, taking some kind of Puritan view of sensuality and saying, this is the devil, this is bad, this is evil, you know, that kind of saying, look again, look more closely. If that is an authentic perception, the closer you look at it, the more you observe it, the clearer it will become. But if there is some perception in your mind, and the closer you look at it, and the more you look at it from different directions, and the less clear it becomes, then that's a sign of its falseness. So as I mentioned yesterday, in the course of meditation, the sensual indulgence and taking refuge in sensual experience, it's not restricted to this like really overt sensuality of sexual fantasy. It can often be something which is quite benign, just things we like in the world, and can be, as I say, can be concerned with literature and art, or even kind of high art, if you like, or sport and politics, anything that you sort of think about, and you just kind of like, yeah, just settle back into that, like into an armchair, and just kind of like enjoy it. So that's, you know, a turning away from the way things are. So we wake up by bringing to mind truths about the human condition, truths about the human body. And so even if your problem is not indulgence in the coarser forms of sensuality, nevertheless bringing to mind Supa Kamatan, whether it's teeth or nails or skin or hair or whatever, it sobers the mind, and the mind withdraws from the sensual world. And then you can find a middle way between those two attractive and unattractive perceptions. With the mind of negativity, whether feeling negative towards people around you, the situation, it's, you know, when you get into that grumbly mood, you know, it's, you know, everything is grist for the mill. You know, it's too early, it's too late, it's too hot, it's too cold. You know, everything's to something or other. You know, you can attach that word to anything at all, and then feel miserable. So that instinctive and habitual grumble, and being able to see things in the most negative light, that's definitely a hindrance, isn't it? And cynics, you see, when we're being cynical, tend to believe that they're realists. So when people who are very negative about everything, they have this, I'm the one who's really willing to tell the truth here, to look at the nasty, sort of unsavory truths. I'm not just blinding myself with this kind of positive thinking platitudes and sentimental emotion. I'm looking at really this is the refuge of the cynic, He's the strong one or she's the strong one, willing to be with this uncomfortable truths. But in fact, it's nimitta. It's just abstracted certain things. I'm looking at it in a very negative way, choosing the most uncharitable interpretation and assuming that it must be the real one. In looking at oneself also, and we see this thing much more in the Western culture than in Asian cultures or Thai culture, is where people just have this basic feeling, I'm not a good person. It's a kind of default. And so let's say you do something really kind and selfless and have no wish at all for any kind of recognition. I don't know if you're familiar with this Thai idiom, we call putting gold leaf on the back of the Buddha. It's when people like to put these little squares of gold leaf on Buddha images, and a lot of people want to put their gold leaf right on the front. So they say, "No, that's me. That's my gold leaf on that Buddha." And some people put their gold leaf around the back where nobody can see, and so that becomes the idiom for like secret goodness, when you do good things and you don't need anybody else to know about it. And this house here, this is owned by someone who's probably one of the greatest exponents of secret goodness, always doing things for other people and offering donations and support, and very few people would ever know about it. And she's the owner of this house, and she would come for Dhamma talks, and who actually owns this house? Nobody would know. It's this little lady over here. So that's one of the very inspiring qualities of Kunyai Dao, who's the owner of Bahn Boon, and built this house specifically so people could, in this way, so that people could come here and listen to Dhamma and practice, because I want to live in solitude, in hermitage, don't want lay people coming in to the hermitage, and so having this place as a place for people to come and learn, study Dhamma, keeping the hermitage quiet and secluded. Anyway, many people will have this altruistic temperament and wish to do good things and not want any recognition. But what will often happen is someone will do some good thing, and then maybe after an hour or 2 hours of some kind of activity, their little thought will pop up into their mind is, I'm really going to get praise for this. So you just have a thought of somebody finding out and thinking well of us for doing this. And then people will just jump onto that thought. Yes, that's really why you're doing, isn't it? Let's be honest. You're just kidding yourself, just saying you're doing it for other people. But really, come on, you want that kind of praise, recognition. So, of like hundreds and hundreds of virtuous mind moments, a single moment of defilement, and it's prioritized. And somehow, particularly in the West, people grown up to think that one negative thought is more real and authentic than 100 positive thoughts, because it's a reflection of some dark truth within. So this is a distortion, defilement. So we developed the metta as a way of countering that. So the metta, as I was saying, is this unconditioned acceptance and benevolence and friendship to all beings. So metta doesn't necessarily always have to be this very kind of wonderful radiation of love and sort of kind of dramatic metta. But it can be this kind of modest metta. It's just like friendship and looking on all beings as friends. Some people have too elevated an idea of metta and set the bar too high, sort of like think you should feel something all the time. I don't feel this, I just don't feel this loving kindness for all beings. Or maybe I do for some, but not for others. That's not the point to have a certain feeling, but it's an attitude, it's a stance towards the world, and it's one in which you refuse to make distinctions. So that's when metta becomes just very natural. So it's not like my suffering and his suffering or her suffering. It's like, oh, there is suffering. Is there anything I can do? Or how can I promote happiness? So this is very much bound up with the wisdom that comes through Dhamma practice, where as less and less identification with me and mine and what I want and what I like and my dreams, that kind of fading away now. And the barriers, the armor falls away. Don't feel you need to protect yourself so much anymore. You're more open. And then other people's happiness and other people's suffering is not something separate. It's more, you're more aware of like your sphere of influence and what you can do. But you're a friend to the world. And metta is from this word, from mitta or maitri. So it's being a good friend to all beings. So there's a wisdom there as well. It doesn't mean just giving people what they want and making people happy short term. It's also what's really conducive to welfare of others. But with metta, then we're developing this, since we are all companions in birth, old age, sickness and death. We're all companions in our aversion to suffering and our love of wish for happiness. So these very basic reflections again and again and again. And you're seeing that suffering anywhere is unacceptable. And happiness, goodness, is to be celebrated and promoted wherever it might be without making that distinction between self and other. So when the mind is caught up in negativity, whether it's towards yourself, towards your meditation object, towards the people around you, towards the situation you find yourself in, the mind is abstracting the negative aspects of situations and people out of the context of life and big picture. So you are looking again, you're opening the mind up to certain truths. So you can only really be angry and resentful and when you look at the world in a particular distorted way. So again, saying you shouldn't be angry and you shouldn't, this isn't like a should be, shouldn't be teaching here. It's saying this is dependent upon certain way of thinking, certain way of looking at yourself, a certain way of looking at the world. And if you can change that way of looking, then the defilement will disappear, loses its ground. So the Buddha is pointing to this again and again, I think. Another example, filial piety, gratitude to parents and so on. And this is not a teaching that I think we should be telling children, you should be grateful to your parents. You should be this, you shouldn't be that. I think this is a very unskillful way of teaching anybody. But what the Buddha is saying is, look again, look at your life, look at how you got to where you are today, look at the things you value in your life. Where did they come from? How many of those things have you created yourself without any assistance from anyone? Nothing, is there? So the more you look at your life and your life in the world and your life in relationship to other people clearly, then I would say the more sense of gratitude arises. So gratitude is, we could say, is an indication of wisdom. Someone who lacks gratitude or is just kind of proud, I'm where I am because, I did it myself, I did it my way, and I struggled, and I this, and I that, that kind of heroic figure who overcomes obstacles and achieves success and fame and so on. That's a fool, to my mind, someone who thinks like that. Because it's just not based in reality. It's based in an idea, a narrative, a story about life. But when you stop and you look more closely, you can't help but feel gratitude. If someone hadn't spent that time, your parents hadn't looked after you when you were a baby, you would have died. Like if you're a bird or a worm or something, you don't need very much time with your parents. You're on your own. But human beings, we have to spend years and years before we can fend for ourselves. and the food and the clothing and the support and the education. And so again, it's opening up to the truth of our life and not taking a particular stand, but looking more closely, yeah. And we can, if we see that our feelings and our change because we add more information or we open up, we look, then we can be sure that that initial feeling, emotion was based on delusion. So if your enjoyment of certain pleasures and certain things changes because you think about it more clearly, then it's not a real refuge to you. If negative thinking dissolves, falls away because you refuse to make distinctions between yourself and others and think about we, all of us, this human suffering, human happiness, then it's based on delusion. If your sense of I'm a completely self-made man or self-made woman is because you won't think about, you won't acknowledge all that you've been given in your life, then it's based on delusion. So one of the famous summaries of quotes from 20th century historian, whose name I can't remember, unfortunately. As I remember, the quote is, mankind, humanity cannot stand very much reality. So we're always finding a way to run away from reality. That's the starting point. But we have this capacity, we have this potential to increase our acknowledgement of truth by training the mind and willing to be patient and to learn from experience. So essentially, as Buddhists, we are learners. Becoming a Buddhist means you're committing yourself to learning about life. So if you're a Buddhist, you acknowledge that only an Arahant is beyond the need to learn. And the Buddha called the Arahant Aseka Pugala. So Seka is Sikha, or study, learning. Aseka is like the graduate. So the Arahant is the graduate of the Buddha's education system, which we call the Eightfold Path. And so everyone else, we're all learning. We all got stuff to learn. And in fact, the noble ones are called the Savaka. They are learners. So we're not even on the learner stage yet. If you're still practicing, you're learning how to learn, basically. Your goal is to become a true learner. And as I said last night, the classroom is the present moment. So I haven't gone through the 5 hindrances, have I? We'll have to extend the retreat for another couple of days. But anyway, I hope what I've shared with you this evening will be of some benefit to you in your practice, and I'll end the Dhamma talk at this point.